Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Conquer the Gauntlet Pro and Strength and Speed owner, Evan Preparis. I've got a guest with me on the line. Before we get to him, though, a quick word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Dry Robe. If you're not familiar with Dry Robe, they're the warm changing robes that you typically see people wearing after World's Toughest Mudder or Toughest Mudder, or pretty much any time there's a cold weather race or it's raining out. And I know it's still hot, it's still kind of the end of summer now, but they take a couple of weeks for them to, especially if you want custom embroidery on it. So if you're looking at getting dry robes for people for Christmas or, just as a present later in the year, I would start leaning towards looking into them now, especially, like I said, especially if you want that custom embroidery on the back and the names and stuff on the sleeve or on the front. So once the weather drops a little bit colder and assuming there's some races going on, you'll see me wearing my Conquer the Gauntlet 1 at races. And they also have seat covers. And so if you want to throw a seat cover on so you don't have to clean off the inside of your car after a race, another good option. All right, let's get to today's guest. Today, joining me on the podcast, I have John Givelis. He's a third-degree black belt in Goju-ryu Karate and second degree in weapons, specializing in flailing weapons. He's trained and competed in Okinawa, Japan, and he's my cousin. So, John, welcome.
Thank you, Evan. Good to be here.
And John's also familiar with OCR because he was my pit crew last year. So for toughest Midwest and toughest East and for World's Toughest Mudder. Got some
and I'm still willing to do it also.
Which is a good sign. That's a good sign. Yeah. So any further details you want to share with us about some of your background in karate?
No, I mean, that's pretty much where most of my career was. I mean, I started in my late teens. I did it. I was active in it for a little over 20 years until, certain life changes occur. I was not injured, just, other factors came in. I mean, just like any other sport, you want to be able to dedicate your full attention and full focus to it. And, starting as a young man, I was certainly able to do that.
I probably should have done this at the beginning, but for those of you who are just joining us and this is your first time listening to the Strength and Speed Podcast, we're an obstacle course racing focused podcast. But what I like to do is bring on athletes from other sports and talk to them and steal some of their lessons learned. Because obstacle course racing is a relatively new sport, fitness improvement and learning a mastery of skills is old, and we can essentially just take those lessons and refocus them towards OCR. So we're going to be talking a lot about John's background and some of the lessons he learned from karate, and then eventually do a crossover at the end or actually apply it to OCR. So let's start off at the top, because I'm not sure how much our listeners are familiar with martial arts. So can you go through, the basics, what are the different forms of martial arts, right? Because there's karate, kung fu, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, et cetera.
Martial art is pretty much an all-encompassing term for any sort of trained fighting. And it's not just Asian styles. There are other styles. There's styles from from France. You have Savate. You had Krav Maga from Israel. There are Russian martial arts. There are ancient Greek fighting martial arts.
Was it Pantocration or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then
let's open up a Greek fighting school.
Let's hear it for the home team. Yes.
Yeah.
More. So then, when you break it down, then you get into the individual or let's say a regional style. So you have karate, which is Japanese in origin. Karate is two Japanese words roughly translated into empty hand. Kung Fu is a Chinese style. Taekwondo is Korean, and they're all different. You really can't say that Taekwondo is karate. You cannot say that karate is Kung Fu. They're all very different, and within the style, they have then sub-styles. So, for example, I studied Okinawan Goju-ryu, which is different from Japanese Goju-ryu, which is different from Shotokan, Kempo. These are all different styles within the group of karate, and those are usually based on the region, based on the history of it. Some styles are newer than others. Some styles are branches of other styles. Okinawan Goju-ryu has much more Chinese influences in it than Japanese Goju. Okinawa itself is this little island, under Japan, over from China. A lot of invaders from both sides coming into this little island nation that a lot of their culture is a mix of both Japanese and Chinese, and including what goes into their fighting styles.
Interesting. So why did you select that specific school? Was that just the closest school to you, or did you specifically seek out that style?
Oh, nothing like that. I needed I needed school credit in some sort of phys ed. And let's see, I wasn't running around in whites playing tennis. No one was going to see me in a bathing suit. Racquetball was a yuppie sport. I just going through the whole thing. It's like, oh, okay, martial arts. I can certainly do that for half a year. And I took it, and my sensei, my instructor, had been an instructor for a lot of years and was very well versed, patient man. Because especially when you're teaching at a school, you're getting people who are maybe like in my case, just you're going to take it for one semester and that's it. But afterwards, I stuck with it. I went from the school, then I went to the dojo and trained there, worked my way up. I even ended up representing the school and going to Okinawa in 1990. I was there in August. And you think it's hot in the New York area in August. Try and be in Asia. That's a whole other realm of sweating.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm not a big fan of the heat, so I'll pass.
No. It's you sweat so much that after a while your sweat comes out without any sort of salt in it. You have sweated out all the minerals. You are now just sweating water. It's a very uncomfortable and just mind blowing. It's like, wait, where's the salt? I'm always nope, that's all gone. You're just standing in a puddle.
So I know a lot of I feel like the typical goal when people get involved and start taking it seriously is to reach black belt. Once you got your first black belt, why did you continue to go forward and, go for a third degree and eventually start working towards a fourth?
Sure. I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, are you becoming involved in something to just learn the basics and then you move on? Do you want to start skateboarding until you are able to do a half pipe or start doing certain tricks and then that's it, and then you find the next interest, or do you stick with it and maybe it becomes a little bit more of a lifestyle? I mean, to sort of flip the question on you, you've done a 24-hour race. Why do you continue? You've done a 12-hour race. Why do you abuse yourself? Why do you travel all over? Why do you talk family members into joining you on this quest?
That was my dad, to be fair. He's getting lonely in the pit, but it is more fun with both of you there. I'll say that.
Yeah. So it becomes a bit of a lifestyle. I mean, you're involved in something, and if you don't do it, then what are you going to do instead? I mean, you have to find something of interest. I mean, I had a few friends in the community, so we sort of worked with each other. We kept going. And, in my early 20s, I got my first job out of college. I have the free time. It's, and I'm living at home. Do I really want to be home in the evenings? Nah, we'll keep doing this.
Gotcha.
And I just, continued moving up. In my case, the rank, it was no longer about the rank. It was about the knowledge. So after a while, you don't care. So, in my case, you could not dangle the next level in front of me because I couldn't care less. That's not why I was doing it. I mean, I was doing it for myself. No matter how hard you train, friends, with family, whatever, ultimately it comes down to your own personal performance. It is not a team event. in my case, again, that's what I prefer. I'm not necessarily a team sport kind of guy. I like being able to just test myself.
Yeah.
I also did cycling for a while, and it was the same thing. No matter how hard I trained, maybe with other people, ultimately, when you're on the course, it is just you.
Yeah, I mean, that's not much different than OCR, right? I mean, you're
Exactly.
99% of the people there are racing themselves against previous performances. They're not racing the field.
Exactly. Yeah. You only get Evan, 2 minutes of me yelling at you, and then you disappear for another hour and a half.
That's
Move
right.
it, Paris, you got this. Go, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And then he's gone.
You mentioned the ranks and the belts. Is karate standardized? Is there like a governing body, or is it up to each school to develop their own system for what constitutes the next rank?
It depends on if there is a history to the school. If there isn't, some schools have an affiliation to a governing body, whether it's in the U.S. or over in Asia. Obviously, some of the newer schools, they may be a chain, but typically, there is usually the schools these days have some sort of affiliation to some sort of small governing body. In our case, we had ties to the Goju Kai in Okinawa, which did answer to a governing body, which then answered to an all-encompassing karate governing body on Okinawa. So it was all of the different styles tied together. While I was there, we also took part in several exhibitions, which is sort of like going into the Superdome and your school goes out to the floor and does katas or forms or some sort of applications, or I hate to use the word performance, but they do something out on the floor, and then you have like maybe 15 minutes, and then a different school will get out and present their school, their style. To come from the US, where the martial arts is still sort of viewed questionably, and then you go to a place like Japan, where the martial arts are not just recognized but also revered. I mean, most people have taken some sort of martial arts in just regular, standard school, just as we would in school, during phys ed, play soccer or basketball. They have some sort of martial arts training or kendo or some sort of martial arts related physical activity. So to go there and where your work is recognized, and you don't have to be as, let's say, as secretive as in the US, it's very humbling.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool. You kind of mentioned, see, practicing martial arts in secret. With as of I guess it was probably mid '90s, the MMA started coming out, right? Started with the big one that everyone knows is UFC, right? So mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And I think some people see that and they now view the martial arts as antiquated. What I guess what would be your response to that as someone who's deep into that field?
Mixed martial arts came out of the whole UFC when historically, if you go way back to the 90s, when it started, where they had different styles getting into the ring.
Those are the best ones.
Those are the best, because
the first five UFCs. Yeah.
Those are great. Those are great because you actually get to see, where one style, is far superior or much more adapt. Whereas now mixed martial arts has become so specialized that it's for two guys getting in a ring and just going for pounding the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
It does not lend itself to adapting to your environment. Let's say a tight enclosed place. If you look at it closely, they're not blocking so much as conditioning their bodies just to take the blows, as opposed to trying to defend yourself so much. They're just going, back and forth, But again, it's now become much more laser focused because most of these gentlemen and women, sorry, gotta be fair, they have multiple belts in multiple styles. Or if they do train exclusively in a MMA style, it is a mix of some sort of striking, some sort of grappling. Ultimately, it ends up on the floor. Most real fights typically will end within 2 minutes. Most fights happen in a little bit more of a closed space. You don't have that much room to work around, obviously, in comparison to, being sort of in the octagon.
Right.
So, I mean, it's the same like with boxing. Two guys, typically a street fight, two guys do not get in a bar and they just go, shot for shot until one of them collapses.
Yeah. It's a good answer. I'm going to share some of my military background here. So, the military does combatives. So that's their form of martial arts, right? So, which is heavily based on jiu-jitsu. So we end up doing, a lot of, rolling around on the ground and, multiple goals there. One, to give the soldiers confidence, and two, if you can actually use it in a situation, if the situation requires it. But at one point, I actually went to a vendor training through Special Forces, and we had these instructors come in. And the cool thing they did, which if anyone has read my book, I talk about it in the last chapter, is they basically would go to like live leak footage. So, footage from CCTV, closed circuit television, and they would watch real fights, just like hundreds of hours of real fights. And the guys that went to the ground, as soon as they go to the ground, essentially the dude's buddy comes in and just beats the hell out of him. Right.
Yep.
So it was like, it really reframed my mindset, because at the time I was like, oh, well, MMA, you go to the ground and that's where everyone ends up. But, they keep showing us all these footage of like, every time this dude goes to the ground, people just pile in on top of him and he just gets destroyed, versus the guy who would essentially strike 2 or 3 times and essentially constantly move. So the other attackers were in each other's way. So they couldn't essentially gang up on them. Were the ones who did the best. And it was, these are completely untrained dudes. Just, a lot of times they're, some of them are drunk and some of them are just, they pissed off the wrong person at the local club. But it was pretty interesting to see. So. Yeah,
when we used to, in training, it was always, the mindset was that we were training for, a real fight, not a tournament type fight, not a points match. And I mean, I've done regular, tournaments in the US. I've got, somewhere a couple of trophies. I don't even know where they are anymore, but to me, it wasn't very realistic. The idea is if you get yourself involved, you strike hard, strike fast, and you be the one that walks away.
Yeah. And then for the military, like I typically have a gun. So that usually evens things out. And my friends have guns all around me. Yeah. So I always get a kick when you mentioned that countries like Korea, their martial arts is like, it's not just something that people do. It's like a way of life. It's part of their like nationality. Yeah. Yeah. And like kind of like marathon running in some of the countries in Africa.
And you adapt. You start out in one style. I know people who have switched then because they get too old, their joints again. Maybe they'll switch over to Tai Chi. Yeah. Which is by definition a martial arts style. Maybe they'll switch to Aido, which is the art of sword drawing. Obviously, you're not actually going up against someone. That would be Kendo. That's a separate martial art.
Right. So anyway, where I was going with that was, occasionally someone will like share or tag a video of like North Korean army, like, just breaking blocks and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. All these like very, very impressive martial arts moves. And it's like, cool. You're never going to have a chance to do that because we're going to drop a guided bomb on you from 100 miles away. And then if that doesn't work, we're going to shoot artillery. And then if that doesn't work, our tank's going to run you over. And then if that doesn't work, I'm going to send an infantry. And then if that doesn't work, right, like my buddy's going to shoot you. You know, it's like you're just never going to have a chance to use it, man. Like,
well, in some cases, though, it's also the confidence builder.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to get yourself psyched up. I mean, I've had 3 mugging attempts, and in each case, because I knew what I could do, then you have the balls to not hand over your wallet. Myself and 2 friends, a guy tried to mug us out by South Street Seaport in Manhattan. We got into an argument over who was going to hit him first. Now, mind you, we're 3 black belts. We're fully trained. We have already, dissected in our heads how this is being addressed. And that's the only way you can pull that off. You're not trying to be a jackass, but, it definitely, you're not playing the part of the scared victim. But if he had, moved in, then we would have taken him apart. I mean, I've heard stories though of the other extreme where, some poor schmuck mugs the wrong guy and ends up being put in the hospital, which to me is a little on the extreme side. You could have maybe just broken his arm and be done with it. But some of these guys, it's just like they've got a new toy and they're just dying to try it out on somebody.
Yeah. That's a great story. Let's talk about more about your personal background, right? So we mentioned flail weapons in your bio. So to define flail weapons for people.
Flailing weapons are typically the weapons that have either a disjointed section, like the nunchakus or the 3-sectional staff, or something a little bit more exotic than like spike and chain. Basically, the danger of the flailing weapons is, unlike, let's say, if you're using a bow staff or the sai or the tuifa, when you stop moving your hands, the weapon stops. If you're swinging a pair of nunchakus over your head and you stop your hand, guess what? The weapon still moves. And I can't tell you how many times of sheer sadistic laughter I get out of watching some guy stopping his hands and the thing just swings around and just clips him right in the middle of the head. And it's like, and that's why you have rubber chucks. That's why because you have to learn that, again, you stop moving, the weapon is still going to move. So you have to learn, it takes a little bit more focus and a little bit more patience, because you have to learn how to find the frequency at which the weapon is moving and how you should move. So when you decide to stop the action, you can't just stop it. You sort of have to swing down slowly, sort of rev down or decelerate. You can't just stop cold.
Gotcha. Now you kind of started answering one of my next questions now, which was, are the weapons essentially just an extension of your arm, and does that change how you're training? But it sounds like with the flail weapons, at least, it definitely changed it a little bit, because like you said, it keeps moving. But do the principles change? A
little bit. I mean, some of the weapons are specialized, so you have to also learn about the history of where this came from or why this came from. A lot of the more traditional Okinawan weapons are non-bladed because they were a invaded nation. So the invading forces, the Japanese, the Chinese, would ban bladed weapon, any sort of bladed weapon. So a lot of the traditional Okinawan weapons are your basic, staff or the tuifa, or even something an iku, which is nothing more than like a big, like a paddle, for a rowboat. So you would take these weapons and adapt. Also, when you're training in weapons, a lot of the time, again, whereas with standard, an empty-handed style, with the weapon, again, what's the application of what I'm doing? I've got a spear. Am I going up against a person? Is this more of a anti-cavalry weapon where I am swinging out at a horseman, or I'm Like some of the weapons are designed to literally take a horse down, by cutting off the front legs and then bring the rider down.
Gotcha. Interesting. So why did you did you choose flail weapons, or that just kind of what happened you happened to fall into?
Our instructor, typically for your first couple of ranks, first black belt, you'd have a sampling. You'd have your basic bow staff, 6-foot stick. You have the nunchakus, a flailing weapon. You then have some sort of two-handed weapon, either a tuifa, which is also known as a tonfa. Usually you see the police have a modified version of that in some cases. Or you have the sai. Again, two weapons, two hands. The sai sort of looks like a short little pitchfork. And that's actually a modified farm tool. So you get a different feel. Do you like the staff weapons? Do you like, two independent hands working together? Do you like the flailing weapons? And then, then you're allowed to choose your next series of weapons. I wanted the 3-sectional staff. That's it's actually a Chinese weapon that I was drawn to, but I know that my instructor had not taught it for about 20 years or so. So basically the strategy I went for the most ridiculous weapon that I knew that he would absolutely not teach me, which is the kamas, which are they're a short bladed weapon, sort of looks like the letter J, a curved knife. Because I knew he wouldn't teach it. I have personally seen people using that and slice their arm.
Oh, geez.
And not realize it, and then suddenly you're being showered with this person's blood. So by asking for the most ridiculous weapon, I knew that when I went back and said, well, okay, how about we do this instead, that I would be assured to get the weapon of my choice. Yeah, I know, it's a little sneaky. But, it is a very difficult weapon. It's about 9 feet long. It's in 3 sections. So this thing is swinging all over the place. And rather than start me immediately, my sensei simply handed me the weapon and said, okay, I'll be back in 6 months. And he let me figure out the motion of the weapon myself. And, I developed my own little drills for how to spin it and do a figure 8 and, whip it around my head and how to, move with it. At the end of 6 months, he came up to where I was and said, okay, let me see what you got. I showed him what I had been doing, and he's like, okay, now I can teach you, now I can teach you a form. Now I can, explain the weapon. But again, that's a different sort of dedication than training in the martial arts, saying, yeah, I'm going to do this until I get my black belt, and then I'm going to find something else to do.
Right. And it sounds like you picked the most complicated weapon. I mean, it's just like I'm visually trying to figure out how I'm supposed to move that in my head, and it's just all I can picture is me slamming myself in the groin or the back of the head. Or
it's and that's why very few people choose it. It's not a big flashy weapon in the same sense as, let's say, the spear or some of the bow weapons. It needs a lot of room. I have done it in tournament once, and in most cases, most people had they knew what it was, but had never actually seen it used. So that was one of my few first place trophies in traditional weapons.
All right, we're going to start jumping over into the obstacle course racing portion of the podcast. As we mentioned in the beginning, you worked as my pit crew for 2 toughest mudders, so the 12-hour ones.
Team Paris, woohoo!
Yeah, one world's toughest mudder. So just kind of, as an outsider coming into that world, just share with me some of your opinions on, ultra distance obstacle course racing and Tough Mudder.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's first of all, it's not like anything you've seen before. You come in and it's just, hundreds, thousands of people, because as you racers know, as you're coming in, there have been other races there. So you're coming in and there are dirty people coming out. So there's this constant rotation of people. Then you've got your little village where all the vendors are and all that craziness. You're trying to set up. Everyone's trying to, it's a mix of, they're trying to set up, they're trying to get themselves psyched, they're trying to prepare themselves. Your dad and I are trying to arrange all the clothes, the tent, all of your gels and pills and juices and waters, and give them a lot of credit for you guys coming up with your system that seems to work very well now.
Yeah.
It is impressive, the amount of people that come into it. Some people are coming in just to attempt it. They as you said, they're going up against their personal best, and that's what they're shooting for. There is at the end of the race, there is always a huge gap between, the pro racers and the amateurs. Most of them have dropped out. I think by the time you come in, we're one of very few tents still in that area. A lot of the people have already packed up, gone home, showered, changed, and resting comfortably.
Yeah.
But it's a mix. It's a mix of the people, and not necessarily professionals, but the people who are dedicated to it. There are those who are just doing it to say that they did it. But everyone comes out and gives it their all. They're all there in the beginning to support each other. But ultimately, it does just come down to your efforts, and just putting one foot in front of the other. Not worrying about the next mile, how many more miles. Let's just keep going. Just keep moving forward.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit already, but what lessons can you take from martial arts and your background in karate that could be applied over to the world of obstacle course racing?
Yeah, it's a dedication. Absolutely. You're not going to jump into it and have it mastered in a short amount of time. It is the constant, literally and figuratively, trudging forward. There is my friends and I always used to say you have to be like a shark. A shark is always moving forward. That's all you can do. Keep moving forward. Again, as you may be training with people, you may be working with people, but ultimately it is you that is out there representing you, and that's it. You can't rely on anyone else. This is not a team sport, where someone is going to pick up the slack or someone is going to help push you along. It is ultimately just you out there.
Yeah. No one cares what you're doing at 3 a.m. Like there's no one's out there being like, you can do, you're like, it's 3 a.m. You're by yourself in the middle of,
you don't even know where you are. You don't even know where you are. Yeah. I don't know where they find these locations, Evan.
Yeah. It's impressive. They're, yeah.
And mind you, I only see the pit. I don't see the whole course.
That's right.
I have no idea what some of these obstacles look like, how much space they take up. It's amazing to me.
You mentioned, we talked a little bit about mastery. How long did it take you to go from entering into karate to getting your black belt, your first degree? And then how long between your first degree and
Sure. My first degree, from white belt to my first degree black belt, was about it was about 6.5 years. My instructor held me back on a couple of ranks. He felt that at certain times he wasn't seeing the full effort.
Yeah.
which is sort of like a double-edged sword. Like, man, that sucked. As opposed to, I got my black belt in 5 years. Like, maybe because that's as good as you can get because you suck. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
And then it was then I think it was another 7 years to my second degree. Of course, black belt ranks, there are no other colors or stripes or anything like that. So it is a long process, is made even longer by not having any sort of breakup. You're not going from white to green to yellow to orange to brown to, it's black belt. It's a black belt.
Yeah.
And if you're into the lifestyle, then you don't necessarily mind. It's just a rank. That's just it. And then, you're also working on other things because, you've made that conscious decision if you've been enough that you're going to stay with it. So you start exploring other things that don't necessarily affect your rank. So at the same time, I was doing some work with Hambu Jitsu, which is self-defense with a short staff, usually something between 24 to 36 inches as opposed to a full-size staff, which is 6 feet. Worked on some jiu-jitsu and judo, got to learn the difference between the two arts. The jiu-jitsu is a much more of a combat art style, whereas judo is more of a sport style. They have, for the most part, removed the striking techniques, where judo is much more grappling than jiu-jitsu. But again, I mean, you're not just in it to get a rank at that point. You are trying to gather as much knowledge as possible. So I mean, I was in no rush to move on.
Yeah.
Shall we say.
I mean,
there are no groupies to impress. So yeah. Yeah.
Funny you say that. We joke about that in the military, that in special forces, you get like a special patch on uniform, right? You get a long tab, it's called, and nickname for it. And we joke about it because it typically only impresses other dudes. It doesn't actually impress the ladies. So we're like,
there are no groupies in martial arts. If you've been in the martial arts for a long time, people are like, man, there's something weird with that guy. So most of us, we didn't mention it. It's fine. It's okay. You go to tournaments again. There's no there are no fans or anything like that.
And really, once you get deep, especially in like the special operations world, it becomes very nuanced. And I imagine similar with like martial arts, where it's like, I can list my qualifications, and it means nothing to anyone unless you're in that world and you understand what it physically means.
Yeah, I mean, because it does take time to master even something as basic as some blocks. I mean, I remember Goju-ryu is a circular style as opposed to a linear style. So you're not just, let's say for a middle block, you're not just coming straight across and hitting the guy, in the forearm. You're doing a more of a circular style where you're coming out, you're meeting the arm, then you're circling back in. So you're using less energy, but it takes a lot longer to learn that circular motion. But I remember, when as a green belt, so I'd already been doing it for, let's say, about 2 years, when I figured out how to do a high block correctly. And it was just like, oh my God, look at this. I call my friends over like, oh my God, you got it. And meanwhile, the lower ranks are like, I don't see a difference. What are you talking about? But the higher ranks know what to look for.
Interesting. You mentioned the amount of time and dedication it takes to move through those ranks. I think, especially in like modern society today, sometimes we lose that, where everything's now, right? Like I get my Amazon Prime the next day. I get, and I meet people who come into the sport and they're like, well, how do I do what you're doing? Or how do I do, it's like, well, it takes time to train to do some of these obstacles. Like unless you have a strong physical background in something else, you may not be able to do conquer the gauntlets like Pegatron, their pegboard obstacle, or their Stairway to Heaven obstacle. Like,
and I
may have to work on just pull-ups for a while.
Yeah. I mean, and most of the people in OCR have some sort of background they started in something else. I mean, I believe your journey, was not OCR from the get-go.
No.
You had looked at, marathon running. You were doing a little this, a little that. You're trying to find what works for you.
I know your favorite bodybuilding. John went to one of my bodybuilding shows in was it Pennsylvania, and I know you guys were having a great time at it. I think you're having a better time than I was. So.
Yeah. My wife was very excited to go to that. She was sure that the two of us would get beaten up later in the restrooms for making comments. But my favorite part of that whole thing, that guy and his girlfriend.
You share it. Go for it.
Okay, so bodybuilding. First of all, you're there, you're up there, and don't get me wrong, these guys look impressive. They have worked very hard. They definitely deserve the attention. But the fact that you're up on stage and people are shouting up to you, it is almost the most narcissistic event I have ever been to, where people are like, "You got this, number 12. You go. You're looking so good." I mean, people are showering you with compliments.
Yeah.
Which is great, because if you're sarcastic like I am, and your cousin's up on stage wearing very little material, and he's been painted, you just have to take advantage of it and yell up. But there was a gentleman there whose girlfriend was also competing. I believe she was in the fit category, which I don't know. That means they get to wear high heels and they don't have to work as hard. I don't know. I'm still confused.
It's nuanced.
I know you tried to explain it to me one time. I'm like, okay, this isn't worth it. But she's on stage and she's doing her thing, and the boyfriend is in the audience, and he's screaming up there, "Number 2, you're number 1 in my heart." And like everyone just stops and looks. It's like, wow, this is a whole other level. Yeah, we are embarrassed for you, number 2.
Yeah, it's a bizarre world. It is very, very bizarre. I mean, the posing trunks, and then like the painting, right? Like when you get painted, you can't have lines on you, so right? So you're like, someone paints you who's not your family or your wife or anything, like completely naked, right? So like the day before the show, you show up and
they got an airbrush.
Yeah, they got an airbrush, and you're like, cool. And they're like, yep, strip down. And sometimes it was a guy painting you, sometimes it was a girl, and they're like, turn around, spread them. And you're like, yeah, of course. And it's a very bizarre world.
Yeah, no, it's just that you could get a body cast of yourself, so when you're old.
Oh, that was weird. Yeah,
I've only seen.
That's the only event I've seen that at. That was really weird. Yeah,
really? Okay. All right.
Yeah, that wasn't normal. And
that was interesting. Yeah. I mean, I understand, taking selfies and maybe having a portrait done, or, having an 8x10 of yourself, but to have a full body cast that you would hang up over your mantle, so that when you're in your 70s, you can look back at it fondly. I mean, it's just
it's weird.
I don't know. I wish I'd priced it out. I was curious, or I should have done what our Aunt Florence would do. Just go up and like, oh, I want to have it done. Our Aunt Florence likes to go to plastic surgeons for free consultations, just to screw with them. Special woman.
Back on top. We strayed wildly off topic there. So one of my friends that was in the military, whenever he listened to sports teams talk and they talk about, going to play a game or a really important game, they'd always be like, yeah, we're going to war. It's going to be a war out there. And my friend used to always get offended. He's like, you're not going to war. It's just a football game. Please stop talking like that.
Yeah.
And as someone in Iraq, he would get offended by it at the time. It never bothered me. I just thought I was like, whatever. So within obstacle course racing, short course racing, like really, really short, is referred, it's from the TV show American Ninja Warrior. So we just call it ninja.
Mm-hmm.
Ninjutsu is an actual martial arts style. So do people in the martial arts look at air quotes ninjas, so like American Ninja Warrior? Is there like does that bother people? Or are they just like, whatever?
I mean, ninjutsu, first of all, is one of the few martial arts that combines both unarmed and armed combat. My weapons training is separate from my from my karate training. They're not interconnected. Ninjutsu is like I said, one of the few that combines both. Without knowing, the history of ninjutsu, it's sort of, you're just using a term that you know very little about. What their role was in feudal Japan. These were sort of like, guerrilla warfare soldiers that, they operated in small groups. They used stealth, on their side. very different from your standard, warrior in the field. So again, let's say as a guerrilla warfare specialist as opposed to infantryman, of World War II. But you see the movies. Some of my friends take offense to it. Me, it's like, it's the uneducated. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like any of the, it's like any of the movies. They some of them are good, some of them are not so good. Some you laugh at.
Yeah, it's kind of when people use the term special forces that aren't special forces. I just kind of roll my eyes and move along. It doesn't. So
Yeah.
Similar. And since we're talking about it, let's talk about some movies, right? So
movies. Okay.
I'm gonna name a bunch of martial arts movies. They're probably all gonna be from the 90s, and you tell me if any of these are good movies. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll start off with the big one, right? Karate Kid. What's your opinion on Karate Kid?
Karate Kid. I mean, it has some valid points. It does show you the motions. So historically, some parts of it are correct. So I enjoyed it. I mean, the whole concept of it. No, that was good. Karate Kid was good.
Okay.
The original, yeah.
Mortal Kombat.
Entertainment value? Oh, high entertainment value. Actually, I just watched it like 2 weeks ago again.
Have you watched the second one, Annihilation, recently?
Not recently.
It
no.
is so bad. It is so bad.
It was bad before, so I can only imagine what it's like now.
It did not get better with time. It's just terrible. The acting's bad. The story's bad. There's nothing redeeming about that movie.
Yeah. Okay.
But they I don't know if you follow video games at all, but like Mortal Kombat 9, 10, and 11, they have like they're almost a full movie.
Wow.
They turned it into like this, like random dudes on the screen punching each other in the face. They turned it into this like deep backstory. It's its own like universe. It's actually pretty interesting, the actual video game movies. But
yeah.
Besides the point. All right, another good 90s one that I remember. I don't know if you'll remember this one. Sidekicks with Chuck Norris and I can't remember the actor's name. Jonathan something, the blonde kid. Do you know that one?
I've never seen it. I do remember it. I do enjoy Chuck Norris. He has not strayed too far. His background is in Tang Soo Do, if I recall. It's a Korean style. He has not deviated too much from the beginning, whereas some martial arts / actors start out doing one thing and then they sort of change it to broaden the appeal, shall we say, the movie appeal. Gotcha. But I mean, I prefer more of his action movies, the Octagon or some of the earlier ones than that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's go with Enter the Dragon, the Bruce Lee classic.
Enter the Dragon, of course. The old 60s, 70s martial art movies, most of them coming out of Asia, Hong Kong, we're all about a couple of different themes. You're seeking vengeance on behalf of your sensei, your seifu, your instructor. You're seeking vengeance against someone who wronged your family, drugs. Enter the Dragon got all those themes together in one movie.
Yeah,
which was amazing. It's I still enjoy it. It hasn't aged poorly.
No, it's still pretty good.
It's still pretty good because they don't rely on a lot of special effects or anything like that. I mean, Bruce Lee. I don't know how he's viewed today, but the man really was all that. He had a ridiculous amount of control and speed. So I know sometimes some people think he was a little egotistical, but he really was that good. He really was.
So since we're on Bruce Lee, Game of Death, the one where he's in the yellow jumpsuit.
Yes.
That Kill Bill.
Yes.
You borrowed the idea from
that one. That one I liked. That one I liked. Although, was that the one that? No, he didn't die in that one. It was the other one he died in.
But I think they made was it Game of Death 2 using like old footage, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it does not work well. I
Yeah.
remember watching it on a deployment, and I was
Yeah.
just like, this is painful to watch.
But it's fun because he's going up through the pagoda, he's facing off against different stylists, which was something that hadn't really been seen before.
Yeah.
Unless you're watching these crazy, movies out of Hong Kong where you have two kung fu masters. One's mastered crane, the other one is mastered snake, and they're going at it. And then you even question is this even legit?
Yeah. I also like that one because it reminds me of the old Nintendo game Kung Fu, where you you go up the pagoda levels.
Yeah.
And at the end of like each one, you like face off a different master there. So
Yep.
I like that one. I think you're probably too old for this one, but Three Ninjas. You know that one?
Three Ninjas? Wasn't that like a bunch of kids or something?
It's a bunch of kids doing karate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I think you're probably too old for that. That was my. I was a kid when that came out.
See,
so
like all the ones that I all the ones that I like are probably you're too young for.
That's probably true. That's probably true.
Yeah, like most of the Brandon Lee movies.
Yeah, I mean,
he had a couple out. Jeff Speckman.
I don't even know who that is.
He was a Kempo stylist. What was his big movie? Perfect Weapon.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Yeah. See, different point of reference. Yes. What else you got? What other movies?
Those are the big ones. And then let's see what else. There's Jackie Chan obviously has a whole bunch, and none of them particularly stand out.
Jackie Chan, I love to watch, not just for the fighting. If you ever get the opportunity, I highly recommend reading his autobiography. Or is it a biography? Well, either way, it's authorized. But his background, his background is being a student in the Chinese opera. So it's not just martial arts fighting, but it's acrobatics and all of that. And it turns out that there are several other martial artists, a gentleman by the name of Sammo, who also trained with Jackie Chan at the time. Who he had a TV series for a while. He's done a couple of movies also. But Jackie Chan is just wonderful to watch what, real dedication can get you in terms of the way he moves, the way that even as a choreographed fight, the amount of focus that you need in order to not hurt someone. And then, as if any of you have seen a Jackie Chan movie, the end of it is always filled with the bloopers where people are getting hurt and broken and busted and bloodied up, and it's a reason why the man has no insurance.
I saw a really good thing on YouTube or Facebook a while ago where like all of his stuntmen came together and gave him like I think it was like a lifetime achievement award or something. But it was pretty cool to see. What about? Do you know Tony Jaa? I think he's like a Muay Thai guy. He had a movie called Ong Bak. Do you know that one? That was like a early 2000s movie. Was
he the one that also did the Protector?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Same dude. Yeah. But the Ong Bak one is, I mean, the fighting in it is insane. We used to watch it on deployment all the time, and just
even you can say what you want about choreographed fighting. Again, though, the skill that it takes to pull it off successfully. I know that when we used to do demos, you do same idea, choreographed fighting, and the amount of focus and power, and you want to look good. So you're coming, full force at your friend, hoping that he's going to be able to stick an arm in the way and block it. Otherwise, you're coming in, at full strength.
All right.
Yeah, I've seen his. Yeah.
I think that about wraps up. Any other recommended ones that you would recommend that you personally like?
Like I said, I think there's I'm trying to remember the Brandon Lee film. I think it's No Surrender. Jeff Speckman is Perfect Warrior. That one's good. The earlier Jet Li films, any of those really are good. Typically, you get a better quality, I think, of martial art movies if you watch the stuff from coming out of Asia, not the Hollywood version, because Hollywood has to insure people, and Hong Kong doesn't necessarily believe in insurance.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, last one. When I was growing up, there was a show called WMAC Masters. Did you ever see that?
WMAC.
So it was the martial arts version of professional wrestling, is the best way I can describe it.
Wow.
So like these,
How did I miss that?
It was so good. I mean, it's as good. I thought it was, as a child, I thought it was good. But these guys who are trained, very highly trained martial artists, they have personas, and they go, and there's backstage stuff, and they go and they fight for. I'm using air quotes. They fight for real in the chamber, and there's like a championship belt and stuff.
Wait, wasn't that hosted by
Shannon Lee?
Shannon Lee, yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now I remember it. Oh, now I remember why I don't remember it.
She was not. Her acting ability is not very good. Side note.
No, it's it was pretty sad that's where she's ended up.
I remember loving that show as a kid because so when they did the first Mortal Kombat video game, they actually used motion cap, like live people to do those moves. Yeah. And some of the people from the video game are actually on the show as martial artists, and they had like an Olympic gold medalist in Taekwondo was on there. And so I remember, and then some of the people from like the actual Mortal Kombat live action movie are in the show. Obviously, they're not the same characters, but it's the same actor. Yeah. But,
all right. No, I do remember that. Yep.
Cool. All right. I think that about wraps things up. Before we go, John, any final shout outs you want to give or people you want to say hi to?
No, just basically the family, as always, your dad, Terry has been, a huge part of my life. Our family, my uncle, my Uncle Terry, Evan's dad, he was sort of half a generation between my father and myself. And then between myself and Evan is a half a generation also. Yeah. So we have this odd spacing out, all growing up. But your dad, great guy. I've always enjoyed spending time with him. Even at, 2 a.m, freezing our asses off. Looking for a cup of soup and a place to make s'mores.
Yeah, good time. Sorry I missed that. I was crawling through mud. Trying not to black out. Yeah.
Where were you? Oh yeah, now I remember. Yeah. Ripping your hand on a fence while you're in a water-filled dumpster. Yes.
Yeah, I was bleeding a lot from that. I was a little worried. I was worried they were going to pull me out for a second.
Yeah, that one was scary when you came running in for that.
Yeah, so that was World's Toughest Moto this year. I came in, it was right before the pit, and it was just blood pouring down the inside of my palm. I was like, yeah.
Soaking wet, and yeah.
Good times. All right, John, thanks again for coming on. I enjoyed this a ton, not only for the OCR and martial arts content, but just as your cousin and spending some time BSing. So thanks again for coming on. For those who are listening, if they want to know more about my background, you pick up my biography, Ultra OCR Man. It's on audio, digital, and hard copy now.
It's a great read.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You go. That's fine. And then on top of that, if you're listening to the intro and outro music, which, John, you can't hear because it'll be edited in later, that's actually the priest of my church singing the intro and outro music, which is hard rock. And, as from Greek Orthodox churches, that is not anything like the music you hear at church. So you can enjoy that. You can look him up on YouTube, Dino Sinos. He's on YouTube under. And then I also started helping out with my church, their sermons and some of the content the priest is producing it in a podcast form. So if you want to subscribe to that, it's you can find it on major podcast streaming platforms. It's under Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church of Kansas City. So you can find that and subscribe and listen. All right. John, thanks again for coming on. Good talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Looking forward to quarantine ending and coming back to New York and seeing you.
Getting back out. Yep.
Yep.
Looking forward to it.
All right. We'll catch you later.
Bye.